So, welcome, ladies, to It's a Death Sentence. Today, we've got two lovely guests with us, and we are talking to the lovely Heather Coughlin. And you are Head of Family Support Services at Primrose Hospice, is that right?
Thank you.
And your role covers lots of stuff, doesn't it, including support for young people, and I'm told you've got an incredible team behind you.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah.
And we're also joined by Mel Van Blockley, which we've just discussed is the most rock and roll name of the day.
She's a superstar.
Sorry to disappoint you.
Apart from being a superstar, you are also a clinical nurse specialist at Primrose Hospice.
I am.
And your role includes delivering clinical support, physio and group support. Go to next card. Thank you, Carrie. And for our listeners, the Primrose Hospice are an independent charity that supports families in the North East Worcestershire area. And can you tell me a little bit about yourself? We'll start with Mel, if that's okay.
So, sadly, I'm not a rock star or a famous actress.
Oh.
I've been nursing for 25 years.
Wow.
I know I look 21, but it's been a
Absolutely.
while. Took a long time to get into nursing. Did a lot of travelling. I was a holiday rep and did crazy things like that. And then thought I need to grow up and do something really important. So I became a nurse. And I've always had a passion for end-of-life care. We get one chance to get it right. I think it's really important we look after people as they're entering the end of their life and their families around them. So it's been something I've always thoroughly enjoyed. And I've been at the Primrose now, I think it's coming up to 3 years, now. But before that, I was in the community for 8-9 years. And before that, I worked in London. So it's something that I never get tired of, thoroughly enjoy. And it's one of my biggest passions is enjoying.
So was it quite a natural progression to go from nursing into palliative care?
I was when I worked in London, I worked in a general medicine ward, which ended up generally being where all the patients went for end of life. So I sort of gravitated to that, and it was something I really enjoyed doing. And then went into complex neurology. So a lot of that was sort of complex conditions with obviously an end-of-life element to it. And then thought, I really, really enjoy this job. And the job came up at the Primrose, and I thought, let's give that a go. Obviously very different working for the NHS in a charity, because we have to raise a lot of money, don't we, to keep it going. So
1.75 million. Say that at every
Yeah,
opportunity.
wow.
It's
a
a
lot,
lot of
isn't
money.
it?
Yeah. So, but it's a varied job. We work together. We've got a fantastic team around us, and no 2 days the same, have they?
And poor Heather has to put up with you now. That's it.
Now I did know her in the community as well.
Yeah. We've mentioned probably about 10
Yeah,
years.
probably
I
10
think.
years
Yeah.
since she came up to Worcestershire. Probably.
Yeah.
So, Heather, tell us about yourself.
My background is social work. I'm a social worker. Worked in child protection in this area for probably about 25, 30 years. And then moved across to palliative care. Interestingly, it was when my father-in-law became ill and was under the palliative service. I'm going to be honest here, and I think I'm like a lot of the general public, that I didn't even know what the word meant. Palliative doesn't mean anything. You know, dying means something, but palliative didn't mean anything to me. And seeing the care that he had around it, I became quite interested in it, and then saw a job. I was managing child protection at that point, and I saw a job advertised to set up a family support service at a local hospice that I didn't know very much about. But I felt really interested, because the reason I came out of child protection is that we stopped resourcing preventative services and became reactive. And I just really wanted to have the opportunity to work with families at an early point. And so we do a lot of pre-bereavement support as well as post-bereavement support. So I came to the hospice nearly 17 years ago now. There was me and 3 volunteers. We've now got a whole building, a team of about 12 part-time staff, and about 100 volunteers under our umbrella. We provide, really proud of the service, and sit very closely alongside the clinical team. And I think we complement each other very well.
We do.
Very lovely, both of you.
Yeah.
So Heather, you've just let us know that you've been there 16, 17 years. What about you, Mel? How long have you been with the Primrose?
3 years. 3 years in May, I think. We come with the party, I think.
And we've already learnt a little bit about the services that you offer as a whole. But for our listeners, can you just try and go through all of the services you offer?
Do you want to go first or shall I?
You go first.
To you.
So from the clinical side of things, we see anyone that has a life-limiting condition. Historically, I think hospices would only see people that had cancer. Now it's anyone that has a condition that may shorten their life. So we see lots of people with neurology issues, so that's things like motor neuron disease, MS, Parkinson's, end-stage heart failure, and of course cancer. So people come and see me, and we have a chat about things, and often I am just someone to get to see these days because you can't get to see your GP. So they come and see me. We do lots of symptom control issues, maybe that's pain or nausea or whatever, and then signpost them to the services that the hospice as a whole provide. We have day hospice sessions that run throughout the week. We have a specialist neuro Monday where they do a lot of work with the physio to keep them as active as possible. We work very closely with a complementary therapy service, arts and crafts, and lots of other standalone things that we do. So coming in to see me is a lot about signposting out to other services that people need to use, benefits advice as well, counselling.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I just see people. I have my own clinic to look after them. So it's a really big team really that we all work together. And I think our mantra across the board is it's about holistic care. It's not just about the symptom. It's not just about what's wrong with somebody. It's actually making sure every part of that person and their family is well supported.
Brilliant.
So under the family support umbrella, we have 5 strands to that. So we have family support, which I like to think of as a listening ear. It's informal support, having a cup of tea, going for a walk with someone, supporting them in that way. We have a formal counselling service, which I'm very proud to say we are one of there's about half a dozen hospices nationwide that are BACP accredited, stands for British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy. It's a real accolade, and we have 1 employed counsellor and about 10 volunteer counsellors who come and give their services for us.
It's amazing.
And we offer up to about 40 sessions of counselling a week. That's pre, post, patient, carer, family members, whoever. We then have a benefits and welfare advice service, which helps people with some of those practical things, issues around housing, making sure they're getting every benefit that they're entitled to. Sometimes people have issues with their employer or pensions, things like that. They can advise and help on that front. We then have a children's service, which I have a children's lead. We have 3 staff members within there and volunteers that help with that as well. Got a brilliant child psychotherapist who volunteers for us 2 days a week. We run lots of children's groups. Again, that's pre and post bereavement. And then we have a living well service, which entails some of the complementary therapies. We've got about 11 different individual complementary therapies, ranging from lovely aromatherapy, massage, Indian head massage, hypnotherapy, cranial sacral massage. We do lots of different things under that banner. And the other thing that people don't always know that we offer, we also offer bereavement support to people that have unexpected bereavement. We've got an agreement with the GPs in our area and we provide that service. So we will do bereavement counselling for that unexpected side of death as well and dying.
My gosh,
Amazing.
you've got your hands
So,
full.
yeah.
And I think it's only fair that we also talk about Trevor at this point. So
we missed him today.
we missed him. So we had a call this morning for our listeners just saying, could one of the guests bring their dog? And which I didn't. I thought, well, it'd be better if they didn't, if I'm honest. But what I didn't know is I'm familiar with the Primrose and I've used your services and I know Trevor the dog. And had I known that Trevor the therapeutic dog could have been the star of the show today, we'd have made space for Trevor the dog. But
And he would have loved it.
we're afraid he might pant onto the microphones or his little paws would go.
Do a little pant. He's a real diva as soon as the camera
is he?
He's got a
It's
huge
lovely.
fan base.
But he's
I
actually,
see.
you know, using animals in that therapeutic ways, it makes a lot of people feel very at ease, doesn't it?
Our site is clearly defined, really. The main hospice has most of the clinical services in it, and we've got a separate building. And we have to keep those clinical services clinical because there's nursing that goes on and there's a need for that. Even though it's very friendly, it's very non-threatening, it still has that element about it. And we just felt really clear that we wanted our building to be very informal, very hospitable, very non-threatening, especially to kids. And so Trevor wanders about, and if they won't come and see us, they come and see Trevor. And they bring him a treat or take him for a walk around the garden, and it really works. So, yeah, it's great.
So looking at death from a personal perspective, what can you remember your first experiences of death? You go first.
Yeah, I mean, my first memory of death is my mum died when I was 10 years old, and we were talking about that earlier, is that this was back in the 70s, and it was a really taboo subject. You know, we weren't, she died on a Tuesday, and Wednesday we had off back to school on a Thursday, and she wasn't mentioned again, really.
It was just hidden.
Until I got into like adulthood, really. She died before Christmas, so all of the Christmas presents had her name taken off. And it was as if she didn't exist. And we weren't allowed to go to the funeral, so we didn't get a chance to say goodbye.
It's amazing.
So my mum went to work on a Tuesday night and never came back. And so, you know, we didn't have the support that we offer at the Primrose, the bereavement support with the children's services, and you just had to get on with life, and that was hard. And I think it's shaped probably myself and my other siblings about how we've grown as adults, really. And it wasn't a good time, to be honest with you, back in the day, because we weren't allowed to talk about her. Our family thought they were doing us a favour. You know, there was no support at school. You know, the kids at school knew that my mum had died because she made the papers. So they were all talking about it. But we weren't allowed to talk about it as a fammy. It was a very.
And was that the case throughout then your childhood and going into adulthood? It was just kept very hush hush.
Yeah, it was, and it's sort of, you know, through the years, obviously other family members have died. You know, my grandparents, my dad, and other people, friends, and maybe that's why I've sort of not thought about it really, but subconsciously thought I want to make a difference and make sure that we talk about death and dying, and we don't use the I'm going to whisper now the. You know, we can't.
Well, you said that to me when we were outside.
You know,
it's so right.
We're all going to
still
die.
skirting around that.
We are all going to die. It's going to happen to all of us. I know we can't imagine it, but it will. And we hope it's going to be when we're in our 80s and 90s or whatever. But it's still, that word is a taboo subject. Death and the word hospice. I think those are the two words. And cancer, obviously, that get whispered.
Yeah.
Although I think cancer, I think people are...
We're getting better.
We're getting better, and there's been a lot of awareness raised around that. So
Yeah.
we've just got a job to do, the four of us now. We're going to have to raise awareness for death.
Well,
The big D.
anyone that will listen, and again, it's the terminology, isn't it? It's about dying is the word to be using, not using the word like lost or because
Passing away.
Where are they? Passing away.
Yeah.
To where?
Yeah,
I
to
think
where?
when I saw the title of your podcast, I actually thought, hallelujah, because, you know, I often say to people, we've all got a terminal disease. It's called life.
Yeah.
We know what is at the end of it, but we go through life without ever thinking about it. And it's something that has become such a taboo. We had one little child that once came into us and said, where's this everyone keeps saying my nan's gone to live in Devon? Because they'd heard the heaven bit and thought it was that they'd gone to, you know, we don't
Because it doesn't
think
mean anything
absolutely
without
anything.
giving it context.
Doesn't mean anything.
When was the first time you experienced death?
I suppose my dad died on my 18th birthday, interestingly enough, and it was a real shock because I'd gone out. He was quite a strict father, and I'm not saying we had the closest, we weren't that close, but it was the first time I'd gone out on the Friday night, and I think I'd got drunk probably for, well, I won't say it was the first time, but
Legally, the first time.
Legally, well, the day before, legally. But he actually came and picked me up. And on the Saturday morning, I worked at Boots as a Saturday girl, and he dropped me into work, and he dropped me in the car. And then I was on the till in the afternoon, and my supervisor had to come and get me off and say, you've got to go home, because he died very suddenly of a heart attack. And it was really bizarre. You know, I think you go into that sort of numb state of being that you can't get your head around it. And, you know, now that I work in this field, and I'm not saying I understand all those stages around grief, but, you know, some of those theories that are there for a way to help us make sense of it. And I think your body does go into shutdown. It's not whether you're close to that person, whether you're not so close, but what is happening is something that's so surreal, it throws everything out of tack. And we wonder why we struggle with it. You know, I think our culture, we've got a lot to answer for with our culture, because if we used to, in the old days, we used to have people laid out at home. I'm not saying I'd advocate going back to that, but death was a very visible thing around us.
And that makes all the difference.
It does. You know, nowadays,
it's hidden from
kids,
us.
Absolutely, and kids have video games and they're shooting people and see death and
Killing
dying
them.
all around them,
But
but it doesn't mean anything.
No. Yeah.
And we allow ourselves this sort of 2 or 3 week window before we have the funeral, celebration, whatever you want to call it. And we allow people to mourn for that bit, and then you get on with life. And when we think back to people like the Queen is more recent, but Diana was the biggie, I think, in our culture, where we had this incredible outpouring of grief for somebody that nobody knew in the nicest possible way. I didn't have a problem with the woman at all. I don't think she was very good at what she did, but she wasn't close to me, and yet we were expected as a nation to mourn and grieve massively everything everything that went on, and we don't do that for our
own loved ones.
For our loved ones. We think,
we don't.
you know, you're allowed to be sad up until that funeral, and then you get on with life. And it's not like that. Where we try and hope that we can get people to is this place where you know, sad isn't bad. That's a saying in our building as well.
Nice.
You don't ever tell yourself off when you're really happy and you have a belly laugh and you're smiling. And yet when we're crying, we tell ourselves off and use stupid things like pull yourself together, what's the matter with you? Instead of allowing ourselves to feel those emotions. If we can get to a place where you're never going to stop feeling sad, but you get to a place where you appreciate how precious having that person was in your life and how better you were off for it, then your life becomes richer. We do change afterwards.
And
but it's not
talking about
also,
that person as well.
absolutely, it's not also always a bad thing. Maybe we become more patient, more resilient, more understanding, more empathic, more caring, more loving. We don't suffer fools gladly. We recognise the trivial things in life and don't
Take
worry
more
about
risks,
them.
you know.
Risks.
Enjoy life.
things.
Yeah.
Live life to the full.
But it's also trying to get people to have some control over their death. Because I think years gone by, it used to be a very medical, the doctor said what would happen to you. And now we do a lot of advanced care planning to get people to be involved in those conversations about what does death look like for you. You know, it's not my view of death, because in the community there's lots of situations. I've been horrified thinking, you want to die on that settee? I need to get you a hospital bed as a nurse. I need to make it right for you. But it's actually having that discussion with people about, well, how do you want to die? What's
Giving them the
important
power.
I
to
don't
you?
want to be in a hospital, actually.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
want to be on my sofa.
Yeah.
And
Power
power to
for
choose,
them.
isn't it? You know,
Exactly.
the right to
Absolutely.
choose what they want to do.
Absolutely.
It's not about what we think as healthcare professionals. It's making sure that any conversation that's had about treatment, whether you want to carry on with treatment, whether you want to die, say on a settee, on the beach, anything like
and
that.
that funeral planning, there was a lovely example, and it was a long while ago before I had a very big team, so I worked with most people on my own, and I had a young woman who had 2 little kids under 5, and she was dying, and she knew she was dying, and she wanted to plan things and prepare things. And the thing that worried her the most was that she used to say, I'm going to be stuck in that box at the front of the church, and nobody's going to want to touch me or see me because they'll all be terrified of me, and it's supposed to all be about me. So in the end, we did a photo box coffin of all of her friends and families, and it was covered in
That's
like
amazing.
photos. And the girls' jobs were to go and get people from the congregation to come up and see
show
their
them.
picture and show them their picture. And
What an
I sat there
amazing
at
thing.
and it's still, you know, it gives me goosebumps talking about it, and it's over 10 years ago now, but she absolutely was centre of that service, and everyone knew that she was there, and it was a joyful occasion. Everyone was crying, but they were happy tears because she'd got what she wanted.
And that's the key thing here, happy tears.
Absolutely.
We'll be moved in many ways. And it's not, we don't just cry through
You're not going to
sadness.
not be sad, but yeah, you can do
How do
it.
you approach death with the people that come into your care? How do you even start that conversation?
It's an interesting one because I suppose you can say they do know why they're there.
Yes,
You know,
yeah, true.
In some ways,
Yeah.
they're coming to that, whether they're coming as a patient or they're coming as carers or family around that patient. And it is the elephant in the room, but it is just about having that conversation. You know, let's start. And I often get them just telling me, you know, stories to get people talking about where they met, how long they'd known each other. And then just talking about what's going on for them at the moment. And a lot of people, some people are scared about what's coming. You know, we can't take that away completely because we don't know what's around that corner. But the clinical services nowadays are, you know, you can help on that score as far as symptom control, pain management, and we can help on that side of spirituality. Whether you've got people that have a very strong faith, I'm often less concerned about than people. A lot of people are the ones that hedge their bets. I don't know about you. I'm a little bit like that.
I'm like that.
You know, if I lose something or I stub my toe, I want someone to make it better for me. But I don't, you know, have a massive faith. And a lot of people are like that nowadays. But I do have a spirituality, I think, that I would like to think goes on and goes somewhere and gives something back.
Yeah.
And a legacy that you hope you leave behind. So it's maybe just getting people to spend time thinking about that and also focus on, you know, providing some of that, what they want to leave behind for the people that are going to be here. You know, if we've got one tiny little opportunity, if we have, as we're thinking of it, a death sentence, if we all know we're going to die, but sometimes we know that a little bit earlier than others.
Yeah.
It's taking advantage of that window. And it might not be doing all the big things. It might be not going and climbing Mount Everest, but sitting and having a video and a curry with your family together, or writing letters, or thinking about things that you want to put together for them. You can use that opportunity.
And what about you, Mel?
I think
how
it's
do you
about being
start this?
honest. I think it's not shying away from that difficult question, you know, am I going to die? When's that going to be? I mean, obviously, I don't. When I first meet somebody for the first time, go in straight for the. So, hi,
You're going
my
to
name's
die.
Mel.
Yeah.
How would you like to die? It's
Yeah.
very much about, you know, it's gaining trust and it's being honest and explaining that if the hospice they're about living with whatever they've got, not necessarily dying of. And sometimes people do come with the very difficult question, you know, when am I going to die? I need to know how long it's going to be. And I think a lot of clinicians now are very much not wanting to commit to that. You know,
I can imagine.
You know, a bit guarded. It's a bit guarded, your prognosis. What the hell does that mean? Or saying, we think you've got a few months. Again, is it 3 months, 12 months, 18 months? They're still months. So it's very difficult. You know, so it's basically about getting trust. If people are asking questions, being honest. If I don't know, I say I don't know. But I also say never ask me a question you don't hear the answer to.
Yeah.
Because I've got a really poor poker face.
Yeah.
I cannot lie.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, once they get to know us, they do feel comfortable about asking those questions. And particularly in a day hospice setting, you know, we sometimes have 12 people in there. And when they first come in, you can see them all sort of eyeing each other up thinking, oh my goodness, I bet they're the next one. Or I bet they're the next one.
Yeah.
And it's sort of being fearful of asking questions.
Yeah.
But we have lots of conversations about advanced care planning, about This Is Me, the new document that's come out, to talk about what's you, what's about you, what do you like about yourself, what don't you like about yourself, what do you want out of life, what do you want out of death. So very much about being honest and getting people to trust you, really. And also the important thing is not being afraid of silence. Because often people try
Fill
and
the
fill
silence.
it,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and it's actually not doing that.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just, especially on our bedded unit. Our bedded unit is based at the Princess of Wales Hospital. We've got, it's called Primrose at the Princess, and there's 6 beds there. It's not actually our bedded unit. It's an NHS unit. All the staff are provided by NHS practitioners, but we provide some support for them on the unit. And so we often would go up and see somebody who's at end of life. And sometimes, as Mel said, you know, there are no answers. There isn't anything you can do, but just having somebody sitting there holding your hand.
Hold a hand,
or just
yeah.
being there in
Yeah.
presence can really, and the nursing staff on that unit are amazing. They have that time and they can do that with people, but sometimes we can just give that a little bit of assistance as well.
I think that's what one of the privileges about being at the Primrose is. I have
Having the time.
Is
yeah.
that, you know, I can spend the whole day with somebody
Yeah.
if I need to.
That's nice. Yeah.
And there's no rush, you know. It's not like when you go to the GP, you've got your 10-minute slot. You can only talk about one thing and then you've got to be out the door. So people can sit and cry. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes I cry too. And
That's my next question.
and
That's my
as
next
long
question.
as they're not picking me up and holding me,
There's got to be a human exchange there.
There has, and
There has
and,
to be.
and that's something that I do, and all us as nurses, we all do it. And I think, from my perspective as a nurse, if you can't cry, then I think you're probably burnt out and need to change jobs.
Yeah, because it's
Massively-
vocation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massively person-centred, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's, you know, if you can spend
Absolutely.
the whole day with somebody, like,
Absolutely.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Your bedded units at that's where my mum was,
Okay.
and that's how I recognised you
Yeah.
earlier. And I'll just tell you a quick story, which is actually quite funny, and I'm all right with laughing about
Yeah.
it, so please feel free. But she was basically the worst nightmare patient that anyone could ever imagine. So she was a very vivacious, very outspoken woman, and she came from the QE to the Princess of Wales.
Yeah.
I arrived just before her, and she was in a room just to the right as you go in. You could see out the window. It was very beautiful, and we'd put these coloured scarves up and tried to make it nice. And the doctor came in, and she sat up. You know, she was emaciated basically at that time. She said, "Are you about to tell me I'm going to die?" Just as bold as. And I remember I had my head in my hands because even in her death, she had that effect on everybody around her. And I remember thinking, we're in this unit that is designed for this, and you are the person that's probably just made it really hard. But that was her way. She was so direct, and the doctor, bless him, I'll never forget. But
Dr. Douglas.
That would be Dr.
I don't know,
Douglas,
he's very
probably.
mild-mannered man,
Yeah.
very kind,
Yeah.
very gentle, and was very. He handled her really well. When
Yeah.
actually presented with that, I think for the most
in
people
some
with no
ways-
training would just go, "What?"
Yeah, what do I
In some
say
ways,
now?
it's,
Yeah.
you know, those direct questions, if we were all a little bit more like that,
Yeah.
you know, like we've talked about children ask you those direct
Yeah,
questions
yeah.
all the time. When are you going to die? You know, when's that going to happen? And they just want an answer, and then they'll ask what's for tea and they'll go off and play. But we have little compartments that we put, you know, our
Put this
happiness
there,
and our
yeah,
sadness and our grief and our crying and our joyfulness, and we don't allow those to merge. And if we were a little bit more honest with ourselves about our emotions, it'd be a lot more
Yeah,
easy.
absolutely. Would you recommend a career in palliative care to other people?
Oh God, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I think it's the most rewarding part of my nursing career in 25 years. I think it definitely is, and I think it's, you know, yes, we've just talked about crying and getting emotional and getting sad when somebody does die, or you know, that we've looked after. But if I know that I've done my best and they've had a good death, you know, we've achieved what they want to achieve. They're comfortable, their family are well supported. I mean, we get one chance for someone to die. You don't do it more than once, which is good for the family as well, which helps with their grief and bereavement. I've done a great job, and that's that really
Must be really
makes
feel
you really
proud.
It's a massively humbling experience as well, because you become very, very close to these families in a very short
Yeah, I
space of
imagine.
time, and you are involved in some of the most intimate parts of their life, and I find that really humbling. With, you know, it's a real privilege to be able to do that, and I honestly mean that hand on heart, that, you know, you come away at the end of the day, and as Mel said, if you give it your best shot, and sometimes we don't have all the answers, you know, we have to be honest and say that, but, you know, you can go home feeling that, yeah, you've done a good job. So yeah,
I mean,
it's
it's
very rewarding.
like today. I had a lady that came to see me today. I saw her last week, and she'd been diagnosed with a cancer a week before and came to see me, and she was going to come to day hospice. I saw her today and thought, you don't look very well. So I took her to one side and she said to me, I'm dying, aren't I? And I said, yes, you are. And so today I've got everything sorted and got her into a nursing home. We have to go to die where she wants to go. And it doesn't always work that way. I'm not saying it's always as slick as that, but within 2 hours, she's got somewhere to go and she's in a place of safety where she can probably, I imagine, just take a nice deep breath and think, I'm being looked after.
And I'm ready now.
I'm
ready
ready
to
now.
go.
Well, I think that's really pertinent on the fact that one of the things that I often think about now in this job is when you think how much we invest in this country, quite rightly so, in our antenatal care, at that point in our lives, you know, we've got brilliant services across the board available to everybody. But at the other end, we're still so primitive in what we're offering. You know, if we had really, really good palliative care, then we may not need some of the other things.
It's interesting, isn't it? 'Cause that's almost the same as when you look at the staffing and the legislation around working in a nursery or earlier setting compared to working in a nursing home or a dementia setting or something like that.
Exactly.
It is absolutely outrageous that we're still like that.
That's
I mean,
it.
I think we'll see those changes, but it's
I
still
hope
a
so.
very, you know,
And
the
I
polar
think
opposites.
It's a way
aren't
to
they?
go.
The thing, I think the thing is about the amount of people that we see is, you know, for what the amount of staffing we've got and all the wonderful volunteers, is we see a certain amount of people, but there's so many we can't see. And you think, you know, today was a good thing that we got this lady in to go to, but how many people are not that lucky to have got involved with us,
Or don't know the services are
and
there.
don't
even know
you
it
know.
exists.
and they're going to be dying on their own, in their own house, without the care and the support, and
It doesn't bear
possibly
thinking
with,
about,
with
does it?
horrible symptoms that no one knows about, and that's really sad.
It's terrible. I'm sure in your line of work you sort of come across people who believe all sorts of things, and you have to be respectful of that. But what do you think happens when we die? Do you want to go first, Heather?
I touched on it earlier. You know, I don't have a deep faith, but I do think there's something else out there, something else going on. I like to think about, I don't particularly want to end up sitting on a cloud up there somewhere, but I'd like to, it's that essence of the person. I really think that our body's sort of the container for the person inside. I don't feel too massively worried about what happens to my body. I will do some planning because, believe you me, it makes it 100% easier on the people afterwards if they don't have to make choices for someone. So I would always encourage people to do that. But I'm not too fussed about what happens to my body. But I like to think that I am going to go off somewhere nice, to some of the beautiful places that I've enjoyed in my life. And I like that idea of a legacy, whether that be in children and grandchildren, if you're lucky enough to have that, but equally in things that we do in life and people remembering you and just, you know, maybe a little bit of what you leave behind.
They will remember you for this,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know, for your
hopefully,
job.
Absolutely. I don't know. It's just nice to have some sort of that sort of thing. So, yeah.
What about you, Mel?
Well, I know we heard the voice of God earlier,
Yes.
but I don't think there's a man in a white robe and a long beard and sitting on a cloud anywhere. I think I'm a bit like you, Heather. Is that I don't really have a very strong belief, but there's something that goes on. In all my years of nursing, I've seen too many things.
Wow.
I've had so many experiences.
Would you like to give us one or two?
Yeah,
That'd be
I mean,
really
it's
interesting.
very much along the lines of, you know, I've been with people prior to their death and they're talking to somebody, talking name-wise and very much animated talking to somebody, and they've died when I've been with them, and then when their family have come in, they've said, oh, you know, what happened? And I said, oh, they were talking about so-and-so, and they're going, well, that was their mom. How did you know that name? And I said, well, that's the name they were talking about. And also seeing what I think is spirits leaving bodies as they've taken their last breaths.
And what does that look like?
So, I mean, it's not like it's in Ghost, the film. You don't see any of that.
So Whoopi's not there.
No, Whoopi's not there. Sadly, that's
Or
Patrick. Definitely not Patrick.
Definitely not Patrick.
But yeah, so just literally, there's just like a bit of a shadow that leaves, and you get that sort of feeling of it's a very strange thing, I can't really describe it, but like a little shadow that leaves the body, goes up and then just disappears.
Do you open the window? Or?
Oh, yes. Yes.
It's the nursing.
That's
thing,
Open
isn't
the
it?
window. When we do, obviously, the last offices and lay people out, we always have a chat, talk to people. Very much
Well,
so.
you're doing your job, don't you?
Try to be, respectful. And,
yeah.
It's
know what I'm
interesting.
doing.
Some family years and years ago, again, this was that we had on the unit, and they were a couple who had a massive strong belief in spirituality and what happened afterwards. And between them, both as an agreement, they wanted to set up recording equipment in one of the rooms at the bedded unit, because they were so absolutely convinced that that was what was going to happen, and wanted to record it. And I can remember the nursing staff at that time were really a little bit concerned about doing this, but very respectful of the fact that that's what that couple wanted. It was no pressure on them to do it, but they did that. And I found it, and it was the wife who was dying. The husband didn't want to accept any support in any way of managing it, because his approach was, it's okay, I'm going to be with, she's going to bed, and that's all going to happen. And unfortunately, nothing showed up on the recording. And afterwards, he really struggled with that fact. And
was he almost relying on that?
Absolutely.
Right,
And
okay.
I found that quite an interesting concept, really.
Because there's a lot of research around the soul has a weight, doesn't it?
Absolutely, the seven something.
Well,
we've
£7.
been
Like,
just
is that all?
Yeah. It's not even that.
at
It's
least
ounces,
so.
isn't it? Andy, what
It's
is
like
it?
in the baby, you want it to be a lot.
21
21
grams.
grams. I mean, that's
Because there was a
nothing.
film made about it. But
there
I'm
is
always
something
fascinated
about
to know
that.
anybody's experience, if, like you've just said.
Yeah.
There's this something visual but quite indescribable.
And also, there can be like a really cold air.
Yeah.
I mean,
And some people
colder-
report smell as
colder
well,
than
don't they?
cold. I mean, that sounds really stupid.
Like an icy.
But like, not like you're going in the freezer. It's so cold. I've never felt that cold ever before, and you can feel that sort of coming past you. But it's sort of feathers.
Oh, I hear that a lot. Yeah.
Robins. I mean, how many robins do we have
Yeah.
at the Primrose? It's sort of
And butterflies.
Butterflies,
yeah.
Lots
And-
of,
yeah.
lovely stories about that. And in some ways, I don't know, I'd like to think that I believe it. I'd rather believe than not believe.
Yeah.
And equally, if it gives people comfort, then in my book, anything that gives people comfort and they find helpful, then is worth.
Have either of
Yeah.
you ever, we're staying with this subject just a little bit longer, but have either of you ever visited a medium?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
A resounding yes. Let's start with you, Mel.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to sort of like the ones that are in the the theatres and stuff like that, and never really. And I've been a bit don't really have a lot of faith in that, because when you get to a certain age, their grandparents have always generally disappeared. So I think it's a bit. But I had a personal experience, and I'll share this with you. Is a friend of mine who's very, very spiritual. She kept saying to me, "I need to come and see you." And I'm like, yeah, fine. She went, no, I need to come and see you. And I said, okay. So eventually she came to see me, and we got into my house, and she went, hold my hands. And I'm thinking, this is a bit weird. This is very, very weird. She said, just hold my hands. So I held her hands, and she said, close your eyes. And then I felt somebody unpeeling my hands from her hands, and I was holding somebody else's hands. And I think it's very strange. And then I had this feeling of love, warmth, the most fantastic feeling that whipped round me at such speed and then flew out of my head, and I had the most horrendous headache afterwards. And she said to me, that was your mum. She's been trying to speak to you, but you're not talking to her. And she described her to a T. My mum's very short, and described her perfectly. And she said she's trying to talk to you through a, like when you go on holiday, you've got the sort of the fly net things. She said, and you're not answering her. That was her just letting you know that she's there.
Oh, amazing. And did that give you some comfort?
Oh, it was an amazing feeling, and it was just, yeah. And I know
Very
that she's
physical
around,
as well.
But it was such a really bizarre And people go, yeah, really? Had you been on the gin? And I hadn't. But it was such a powerful experience, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, it's lovely.
What about you, Heather?
Nothing is extreme, isn't it? All right. I don't know. I think it was something that I was always interested after my dad died, because of it being so sudden and me being quite young. And I can remember reading all the Doris Stokes books.
Oh,
I
good
think
old Doris,
probably,
yeah.
lots of people have read those. And I went to a few. I must admit, I never had massive, success or things that came out of them. But then I don't know what I was going for, if that makes sense. I didn't particularly want my dad to contact me, so it wasn't about that. But I think, like I say, I think I'm quite a spiritual person in the fact that I would just like to know more,
Yeah.
and that there is something more, because I can't believe that all of this is all there is. And I think, it's a little bit of our egos really to think that's it.
I totally agree with that.
And
I wonder sometimes if it is our ego that just forbids us
that's
to
it.
think, no, that's actually the end, it's final.
That's it.
You don't. Do you remember the time before you were born? No, you don't. So it's the same. I don't think we can really...
Actually, I have got a slight that I'll tell you, because I find this thing, and he'll kill me for talking about it, but one of my children, I won't name him because he'll hate me, and my sister is a child psychotherapist. I don't know if you know the concept of indigo children.
I did.
I've heard of that.
Somebody
Yeah.
talked to me about that only 2 weeks ago.
Okay, well, my little boy definitely had a phase of that. When he was about 3 or 4, just turned round to me one day and said, "Where's my other mummy and daddy?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he went, "Where's that other mummy and daddy that I used to live with? And that house with the red front door and where I used to write?"
Because they say they
Past
have
lives,
memories.
And
isn't
it went on.
And it's their
for about
formative
2
years,
weeks.
isn't it? Yeah.
I don't know. I rang my sister and said, "Oh my God, what's going on
Something's
here?"
wrong with him.
Yeah, he's talking about all of this. And she told me this concept of him, and I read about it, and I didn't quiz him about it, but he talked about it non-stop for about 2 weeks and then just stopped. And I said to him once, "Have you forgotten about that other mummy and daddy?" And he looked at me and went, "What are you talking about?" He didn't have a clue what I was on about.
Was he very
But,
young?
Yeah, like I say, he was about 3 or 4.
Yeah,
He
because
was
they
really
say up to
young.
the formative
So,
years, don't they? Say
yeah.
like 5
I
or
don't
6,
know.
if they're going to have this kind of insightful past
My
life
daughter had
thing.
the same.
Really?
My
Where does
daughter
that
at
come
that
from?
sort of age, she talked about her other mum.
Yeah.
She said, "You're nicer than my other mum." She used to wear sandals and a white dress.
Wow. At least you were nicer as
That's
well.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
And better dressed then.
Yeah. I'll remind my son of that. I didn't get any comments about that.
Am I nicer than the other two?
Did
you like
love
our
me
front
more?
door?
You love me more, don't you? Yeah, yeah.
How do you guys think we can get people talking about death, the death word, and normalise grief?
Well, this helps, definitely. I'd also love to get, if you can get anything through to any of the media that just stop them using the term passed away, that I think that would be a massive...
In favour of death.
Oh,
Yeah,
let's just call it what it
absolutely.
is.
Let's just
yeah.
call it. Let's retake it, re-own
Dying,
it.
death,
Dying
yeah,
and death.
yeah.
If we said those words, then we wouldn't be so frightened of them. If we talked about it, if we just started
So we kind
saying,
of fluffed it
when
out a
did,
bit, do you
when
think?
did your mum die, rather than when did
did
they
she
pass
pass away?
away? And we do it because we think we're being kinder. We think it's softer and more caring. And it may feel that. I would never correct anyone that ever said to me, "My mum passed away and so, but I would use that word back. And I just think in the press, in the media, I have to say, I think it was an absolute lost opportunity with the Queen, and I may get shouted down on this one, but I think we know she was probably knew she was dying towards that end, and I think that was a real opportunity that we missed to talk about palliative care and
Yeah.
death and dying,
Yeah.
and I think that would have been a fantastic opportunity. So I would love the media to
And a massive
promote it.
outreach, because the Queen,
Absolutely.
everyone
my
was
God.
talking about it.
Everywhere.
But then, the more people who are doing things like we're doing,
Yeah.
even just having these open, frank
Yeah.
discussions, and I think it doesn't have to be morose, it doesn't have to be morbid, it doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be really sad. It needs to be frank,
Yeah.
it needs to be honest, and it needs to be with love and humour and taste and all of those things.
Absolutely.
But the more we do it, the
And let
less
people
taboo there will be.
Let people be sad, but equally let them smile as well, because they're remembering those memories and those happy times. And as I say, that their life was richer for that person being in it.
Yeah.
You know.
Have you got any plans in place for your own funerals? Have you
Oh,
thought about
yes.
that?
Oh, yes.
Tell us about it.
I mean, I suppose whether it's because of the job that I do, but, I'm a single parent, and, I don't want my daughter to have to do all the planning and funerals and doing the bits and pieces. And also, I can't stand our music, so I don't particularly want to playing some hip hoppy rubbish. So I've written it all down. So I've got me coffin that I want. I'm going to be wearing my favourite tartan pajamas with my favourite shoes on. I would like to take the ashes of my animals in with me. I'd like to take a bottle of champagne, but apparently I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that in the creme because it goes. So music and everything. So
Maybe try and drink it first.
Well, yeah. So I've got it planned, and I say I've got it all written down, so Wonderful. I know exactly what I want, because I say it's about you being part of that. And I'm a bit like the person you're talking about. It's about me.
Yes, all about me.
Let's have a little chat about me.
Absolutely.
You know.
And what about you, Heather? Do you have plans?
Yeah, I know the music I want. I know the coffin I want. I am one of those people. I swing between the wanting to be cremated and wanting to be buried. And I think that's the more conversations you have with kids about that, the more I think about that. And I just like to say that it's all right to change your mind, because, as long as you put it down and cross it out and keep changing that. Because kids ask the brilliant questions, you don't want to go in the ground because the worms will eat you, but equally you don't want to go in the fire because it might hurt. And I sort of think, I thought that
There really are pros and cons for both.
Think it through. You have to think it through, don't you?
Hopefully it won't hurt.
Our last guest is having a sea burial, isn't
Yes,
she?
she said she's going to have a sea burial, which
nice.
is amazing.
Yeah.
So, ladies, thank you. It's a wonderful job you do, and the immense support you give to the patients and families is truly amazing. I know this firsthand, so I'd like to thank you for having my mum and my family, because we used all of your services, in fact, every single one. So she was on the ward, and then we accessed your services in the day hospice as well for some time afterwards. So
come back and see us whenever you want to.
I would definitely.
I think you could help with, it's not a scary place. Because I still think that people think,
Well, it's not. It's wonderful.
that
Come and
when
do a
they go
live
in,
podcast from
Yeah,
the
Yes, let's do
We'd love
it.
to do
Absolutely
that.
love to. Let's make that
Absolutely.
happen.
come and
Yeah.
see
Talk
where
about
we're
that.
at, because I think people think that we all
I think
dress
that
in
people
black,
think it's going to be some gothic
we-
building and
and
it
we
frightening. It's
whisper,
really not.
and we don't talk very loudly, we don't laugh. And
We were
have
so
such a
welcomed.
strong-
I mean, we slept over because Mum was only there a week, and we took it in turns to sleep over, albeit the last day where she actually died. But we were there while she died. But the services you provide to our local community, they're incredible and vast. So I know we touched on this earlier. You rely heavily on fundraising. Do you have any events coming up that you want to plug? Because we will try and get this out as much as we
I've
can
left
for
them
you.
over there in my bag. But I can tell you about, we've got our memory walk in July.
Yeah.
All of the information on the events are on our website, so please check them out.
Do you want to give us your website?
Primrose Hospice.
I believe so.
Just Google that.
We'll
you'll
pop it
find
in the footnotes, shall we?
Put it in the footnote for us, please.
We'll
But
link
yeah,
you
we've
in.
got the memory walk coming up in July, and then our biggie that we do is Go Yellow.
Yellow
which
Week, isn't it? Yeah, we
in
did. That's June, is it?
June, isn't it? See, I've got it all written down in my bag over there, and I should have got them, shouldn't I?
We'll make sure we get a list of your events coming up, and
But
we'll push that for you.
And
as well.
we'll take
We've got
part,
a brilliant
hopefully.
fundraising and marketing team that look after that.
But also we have people that do crazy things like run marathons, that walk up Snowdon. So if you ever want to do anything...
Snowdon at sunrise, that's
Yeah.
beautiful,
Yeah.
and that's coming up in a few weeks' time. So yeah, still
Well, maybe we can
places
take part in
available.
something.
Oh
I
God,
can't
you
get
must
Snowdon.
do.
No, not at Snowdon, but maybe something else.
Absolutely.
The
Something
memory
a little
walk is
lighter.
Yes.
Memory walk could be
the memory
fine.
walk is really
Yeah.
nice because it's it's one of the local. It's Hanbury Hall, I think.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, really
Hanbury
nice.
Hall,
Yeah.
it is Hanbury.
Yeah.
I know that
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, so it's a nice
Okay.
sort of.
We'll get a list of all of
Yeah.
your events, your
Yeah.
upcoming
That
events, and
would
we'll
be
make sure
perfect,
we'll
thank
give those
you.
a push as well.
So we've just got one last question for you that we ask everybody. So if you could find out when you were going to die, would you want to know?
No.
No?
I'd probably to sit on the fence. I'd probably say yes, only because then I'd use my time very wisely on doing all those things that I wanted to do.
Oh, it's nice to have a balance. So.
I think I just do every day like it's my last. So I will make sure that I do something nice every single day and make the most of it. Because I think if you knew your date, you'd be just counting it off, thinking, and I think that would probably send me crazier. So I think I'd just have a party every day and just, see what
And be a
happens.
rock star, Mel. So
Be a
we're
rock
going to
star,
get you
yes.
singing in a minute.
Well, this beautiful area here, I might have to come back, but I cannot sing, so it could be embarrassing.
Emma could just sing. We'll
I'll
just
be
dub
back
her
in-
in.
I'll be
Yeah.
Backing singers.
Absolutely.
Backing
Well,
dancer.
this is our
Death and dying at the
fundraising event for the
Deaf and
Primrose.
dying at the back
Death and
of
dying
you.
at the back of
Sha-la-la-la-la, death and dying. It'll be great.
I can be a backing dancer. That's what I could do. Yeah.
But thank you so much for
Yes,
being here,
thank
ladies.
you.
It's been a blast.
Thank you so
It's
much.
been
Thank
lovely
you for
talking to
having
you.
us.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
And we'll sort out coming to you as well.
Please
Absolutely.
do.
Come
That'd
and
be good.
do your podcast from us.
That'd be great.
We'd welcome you with open arms.
We will. Thank you
Brilliant.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.